Hi there, my name is Lily Green.
And I'm Darcy Lewis, and this is
The Politics Hydra.
Here at this podcast, we see similarities between Heracles' trials and the American political complex. When you attempt to unpack one issue, two more grow in its place. And since Heracles was busy, you got us.
We slay this Hydra not for glory, but for the sake of exploration and further academic inquiry. Here we believe American politics are complex, multifaceted, and worth exploring. Throughout this multi-part series, we will attempt to identify, define, dissect, and discuss facets of American politics that we find pressing and current. We're going to talk about beans on toast.
Beans on toast.
You ever heard about that?
Well, yes.
Well, from me.
Yes. No, not from you. Outside of our friendship, yes, I have heard of beans on toast.
What do you know about beans on toast?
It's gross.
That's it.
That's it. There's no reason. It looks like, if I say poverty, it's going to sound elitist.
No, I think that's actually really fair. So let me give some context here. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to have a critique of the monarchy in the modern world.
The English monarchy.
Yes, the English monarchy in the modern world. We're not handling
all the monarchies in one day.
No, with a foreign policy, kind of.
Yeah, so foreign policy is our kind of baseline for this, because this is a political podcast. So I felt like it would be really great to have a foreign policy episode, and definitely not because I'm taking a foreign policy class and I'm not trying to be useful. But overall, there have been very big things happening constantly, not just domestically. And so we want to kind of branch out, and we're going to England today.
Exactly. And we're going to do it in a far less cerebral way. We're going to talk about the death of the Queen, R.I.P. But to get us started, I really wanted to bring us some beans on toast to eat in the studio today, but we're in a really nice, studio. No, it's going to be a mess. I don't need to bring the beans in here. That just seems kind of...
Would it be on white bread?
Okay, so we're going to talk about it. But when you said that it kind of reminded you of the idea of poverty, that's...
The idea of poverty, yes. It reminds me of poverty.
Well...
wartime stuff.
You're not far off. So when protein was really hard to come by during World War II, we used beans. Beans are actually, as a fellow wannabe vegetarian, but can't actually do it because she loves hamburgers too much, beans are really great.
Protein.
Yeah, they're great protein. And so what they used to do is they used to put it on bread. And I will say that it's not the baked beans that we're familiar with here in the United States that are super sweet. I think they have molasses in them. They usually have pork in them. Not like that. They're just beans. They're just very simple beans. You've got some salt, and you put them on what is hopefully a buttered toast. You're not just pulling out a piece of
Are they toasted? Are we talking just...
It's toasted buttered bread. Usually if you go to a pub, it's going to be a nice homemade piece of bread, and it's going to be... The idea is that it's going to be good, but it was just a cheap form of protein during World War II, and specifically here in this article it says that today it's more popular as a brekkie for broke university students, budget-strapped travelers, and for people feeling nostalgic for those days. So we can't crack one open for the Queen, so instead we're going to read about the history of beans on toast, and that's all I have to say about that. And I hope that we can eat some soon. What do you think? Does that sound good?
That sounds awful.
Well...
I'm just trying to wrap my head around being able to go into a establishment and order this, because it seems like the equivalent of going into a restaurant and ordering a hot dog on a plain piece of bread.
Is that not what it's just okay.
No, I'm saying without the hot dog bun is what makes it.
I guess. But honestly, that's not bad too. Whenever my family ran out of hot dog buns, you just pull out that piece of bread and it does the same thing.
At home, though, you don't go out into the commercial public and ordered something like that.
I think you have an American taste palate, okay? And you're being a little ignorant to the culture of people in the UK.
The culture of theft?
Anyway, moving on.
So beans on toast, that's kind of like a form of soft power. And so soft power is basically the concept that your country basically has a personality. And whether that personality is based off of good feelings and soft things like humanitarian efforts, or your cuisine, or your culture in general, that's usually a soft power thing. So whenever people think about America and they're thinking a cheeseburger, or they think about people like Friends.
Baseball. Friends, the show.
I don't like Friends, but still.
It's a good show.
There was one black person in all of the seasons, and it's based in New York. It's completely it's completely unrealistic.
I see what you're saying, though. Here on Wikipedia, it says soft powers involve shaping the preferences of others through appeal and attraction. That definitely makes sense. And I think that in the United States, we do that for a lot of other cultures and countries. But what is this idea of like, what is America's soft power? Is it baseball and cheeseburgers? I don't really know, right?
I mean, it can be. It could be anything,
okay,
you know?
Interesting.
And so, like, your first thought, whenever we wanted to talk about England, was beans on toast. And so another form of soft power that's going to be the main focus of today's episode is monarchy, the
Constitutional monarchy.
Constitutional monarchy. You want to tell me what the difference is?
We'll get into it later.
We'll get into it. Got it. So, like, first and foremost, Lily, did you want to be a princess as a kid?
Absolutely not.
What?
Why would you think that I would have wanted to be a princess?
That's usually
as a kid?
what little girls want.
No. Now I'm sure if my mom's listening, she's gonna be like, "Well, actually, when she was 6 years old, she did wear a princess dress." No. I think I liked sparkly, pretty things, like a lot of people do, just no matter what their gender is. But I had a cousin who was always. Dang, my grandparents listened to this too. But she was always Cinderella. I feel like, or maybe in my head, maybe I just view her as Cinderella. That's a compliment. Shout out Riley, okay? But she was always a princess, and so I felt as if I needed to be the exact opposite. Don't know why. Probably some family stuff going on there. But
is the opposite of a princess a peasant?
No, I just felt, I mean, I had 3 brothers, you know, and their family dynamic is very much a boy and a girl. So they were like the opposite of the idea of like gender binary, like Halloween costumes. And so mine was always, I'm going to try to be scary. I think one time I was a sock monkey, like a zombie sock monkey. Yeah, so no, I wasn't a princess as a kid. Did you ever dress up as a princess?
I was a princess as a kid. That was a majority of my
Who did you dress up as? Who was your favorite?
No, I didn't have like a favorite. I was I was my own princess.
Okay.
If that doesn't make sense off of how long you've known me.
Yeah, I guess that kind of, if we're going by that definition, my grandmother does this thing, especially when we were younger, where like I was the queen of all the grandkids because I was the firstborn.
Same here.
Yeah, and so I was the queen. I never was a princess, okay? I was the queen.
I don't like the distinction on queen. Princess has like more of a less responsibility attached to it. You're just pretty.
Do you want to be Anna or do you want to be Elsa?
I want to be neither.
So what does that have to do with today's podcast?
So it has to do with basically the death of the queen. So Elizabeth II died the 8th of September. So first let's get in. So another part of the soft power is the perception of the monarchy. And a lot of people are paying attention to them for like how they dress, what kind of lives they're living. There's a lot of extended focus on their marriages and their funerals and their coronations and all the sparkly stuff. And so that brings in a lot of people. Like, so whenever we think of England, we have these soft feelings about the monarchy because like we're in this very democratic. We're in a democratic setting, but like the world has progressed past the need for kings and queens for the most part.
Right.
And so it's still kind of looked at with this kind of novelty.
And when you have so many girls who grow up, you know, wanting to be a princess or like idealizing what that means, when you have a country that still has real life princesses, that's a very great example of soft power. So yeah. But there's a lot of appeal in that, and it makes the UK a lot of money. And that's kind of one of the first things to think about is like how much money do they, meaning the royal family, make in tourism, or kind of what does their
how their
image,
income comes
in? How does their image play into the actual government? And so in the fiscal year of 2019 to 2020, the royal estate alone brought in nearly 49.9 million British pounds in ticket sales. That is and that's not just like, that is to the royal estate, only tickets to go tour the grounds. And that is insane. So I was trying to do more research. Okay, if they bring in nearly 50 million pounds of money just to go visit the estate, how much revenue are they bringing in general? That's kind of a hard estimate to get. In the fiscal year 2019 to 2020, the royal estate alone brought in nearly 50 million British pounds in ticket sales. And that's just ticket admission to the royal estate. Okay. So I was trying to figure out how much money the royal family and this kind of idea of soft power, everything that they're bringing into how much money are they actually bringing into this government? And the British Tourism Agency believes the royal family generates somewhere between 500 million and 700 million pounds in revenue each year. So they're bringing in all this money to the country, right? Mm-hmm. But how much does it cost to fund a royal family, right?
Like they're living like celebrities, basically.
They are, yeah. I mean, they did an interview with Oprah. You got to be big time, you know what I mean? Sorry, I guess they didn't anyway. That's a whole drama.
Yeah,
but
that's the whole thing. They know like the Elton Johns and such.
Exactly. So there's a bunch of debate about how much it actually costs to fund these families. It's somewhere around $50 million a year. But British Republicans suggest the number is far higher due to like security cost or public relations fees, somewhere around 200 to 307 million pounds. That's a lot of money. And so if you're bringing in 500 to 700 million pounds, 200 million pounds is, let's say that's your profit. That's still a lot of money, but is it enough? So there's something else going on here. Okay. It's not just the money that they're bringing in. That's what I heard a lot on like TikTok. Well, I should clarify. When the Queen died, it was a big deal for a lot of reasons. We'll get into that. But people on TikTok were talking about it a lot. And so her death was definitely publicized more than I think it would have if there hadn't been a trend of like RIP to the Queen, RIP to the GOAT, stuff like that.
RIP to the GOAT?
Yeah, no, for real. It was kind of insane that people cared so much. But sorry to my British fans out there.
She's not sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm really not, and we'll get into that. But people are like, oh, well, they must bring in a lot of money. But it doesn't look like it's enough that a government would
want to keep them.
Yeah, it's not the only reason. There's something else going on. And so how much money is the next question is, okay, so how much money is the royal family making?
Okay. So the way I've kind of observed the royal family accumulating wealth is mostly through property.
Okay.
So first and foremost, you have like basically three ways that income is coming to the royal family. So you have private wealth, the duchies, and then you have the sovereign grant. So the duchies and the private wealth, they're both very property based. So like you have private wealth, which actually belongs to the Queen. Like it's stuff like from inheritance, basically from like her great great grandparents and stuff. She gets to keep this stuff. And so like the duchies are like, duchy is fun to say.
It is, yeah.
So you have like the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of Cornwall, and the Duchy of Lancaster goes to the oldest child and it trickles down into their kids. So that's how they get their money. Okay. And then the Duchy of Cornwall goes to the Queen, but it only goes to the Queen because she is the Queen, you know? It's not like she owns it or anything. Like as soon as she stops being Queen, it goes to
King Charles.
It goes to Queen Charles.
King Charles III or something like that.
Boy Queen, King Charles III. Right. And then we have the sovereign grant, which is kind of made up of taxpayer money. And this includes like the Crown Estate. And it's not necessarily like pocket money for the royals, but it's more of like for doing the job of being a royal. So it's covering like the cost of travel and all those other kind of miscellaneous things you need to be able to do like diplomatic stuff.
That's interesting because I hear one of my sources from the Atlantic. According to Buckingham Palace, sustaining the royal family cost Britons 53 pence, or about 81 cents per person per year, and the total came to about 33.3 million pounds for the 2012 to 2013 year. So there is a significant amount of taxpayer money going into funding this. So when we'll get into like approval ratings of the Queen and of the monarchy and stuff, but it's not as high of an approval rate. Like with so much money going into them, you think that the approval rate would be way higher because that's how you get the funding, but it's really not. What else is there to that? Oh yeah, this is the most important thing. They can't have their own independent income. Yeah. That was new to me. I didn't know that.
So whenever I came across this information, it was working off of the whole Harry and Meghan thing that just happened whenever they
Fiasco.
Yes, whenever they separated themselves from the crown. And so what a lot of people were upset about wasn't necessarily that they're leaving, but it was more that now that they're separated from the crown, they're allowed to have their own income. And they're already like you don't really get to break away from the fact that you were royalty. And so that kind of accumulates prestige, and that kind of, they were worried that was going to take away from the actual focus on the queen and the actual monarchy, because the monarchy can't technically make money off of being a monarchy.
Right.
But they can go and do commercials or do whatever.
Now that they're separated.
Separated, and that can accumulate a lot of money.
Right. And again, I already talked about this, but they got to go on Oprah. Like, you don't just get to go on Oprah if you're nobody, right? And
True.
so that's a type of publicity that you just don't get unless you are already super famous. So there is something to be said about how they're still profiting.
She was an actress. I never watched Suits.
Oprah?
No. Yes, Oprah is also an actress.
I was like,
but Meghan Markle, yeah.
Yeah. You ever see, this is completely different.
Go.
You ever, Kate Middleton?
Yeah.
You ever see her, like, college party photos?
No.
Like, before she became whoever the heck she is, like, parties of her drunk in a taxi cab. She looks super, like, those are the photos that you show your kids of, like, your partying era, you know what I mean? And anyway, we should show, I wish I could insert photos to show you there. But yeah, they both had very interesting lives before they became, I guess they were both princesses at some point, right? Did Meghan never become a...
No, they're like regular people. That's the whole
not
deal.
Anymore.
I mean, not anymore, but now they're like the Duchess of something.
Yeah, but okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move into the subject of today's podcast. That is the queen, the laid queen herself, right?
Yeah.
Let's just talk about who she is.
Yeah, so we're dealing with the world's longest reigning monarch, so there isn't very much to cover. She was born Elizabeth Alexandra May Windsor, mouthful, in London on April 21st in 1926, and then died Queen Elizabeth on September the 8th, 2022, in Scotland, which that's going to come into importance later on. That's basically where her summer home is. And so I'm sure she did some stuff in between that.
I don't care.
But yeah, so she was born to parents Duke and Duchess of York, and eventually they would become King George IV and Queen Elizabeth I. Her father's father, basically her paternal grandfather, was the king whenever she was born. So that was King George V.
Okay.
And he was basically in charge whenever she would refer to him as Grandpa England, which sounds really endearing. I don't know. I just thought it was cute.
Yeah. It's pretty cute.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. So we didn't think she was going to be queen because she was basically third in line after her father and her uncle Edward the
Eighth?
That's looking like the 8th.
Yeah.
They're in Roman numerals. I promise I can read. So he was supposed to be king, but he dropped the responsibility because he wanted to marry an American who had been divorced twice. And like, I don't think
messy.
Super messy, because like I don't think it was like against the rules, but like everyone was super mad about it.
Okay.
So like he was like, okay, I'm just gonna take my wife and I'm just gonna leave. And so then her dad ends up being the king.
Okay.
Making her the next in line at age 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine being a 10-year-old and being like, yeah, you're gonna rule the country. Everything's gonna be fine.
There were kings younger than that though.
Yeah,
so I mean,
of course.
it's really not.
But in modernity.
I guess. They don't really have that much power, though, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. But I get what you're saying. She was rather young to be the heir, I guess.
Yes. So World War II hits, and many suggest that she and her sister be taken to Canada for safety reasons, but her mom, the queen, states, the children won't go without me, I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave. And so that was, we're staying here, basically. Okay. The kids are staying, we're staying here. And so moving forward, upon her third meeting with Prince Philip of Greece, she claimed to be in love with him. She is 13 at the time, and he is 18. After the meeting, what are you talking about? This is true love. After the meeting and throughout the war, she is in contact with her future third cousin, Philip, while he's in the Royal Navy. And then they'll be married at Westminster Abbey on November 20th in 1947. She would be 20, he would 21, he would be 26. Did I mention that they were double cousins? They were cousins twice. So second cousins once removed from King Christian the Ninth of Denmark, and third cousins through Queen Victoria.
Okay, so Cole and I were having a discussion the other day about what it means to be once removed. I don't know why in my head I thought that meant like we don't like these people anymore. We're removed. That's not what it means. It means like the cousin to your parent, right? That's what that means. So they are definitely related.
The family tree is a circle at this time.
Yeah. Ooh, gross. Okay.
Yeah.
Any of our Game of Thrones watchers out there? How's the new House of Dragon show going? I'm getting so many vibes. But I wonder, so she didn't think she was going to be queen, but we don't have anything in here about her being like the head of state. Was there anything, did you find anything about her being a female and getting that role, or not so much? When I was researching, I found some stuff like that.
Tell me about it.
No, I don't really have a lot. I was just saying like that was when I was trying to figure out, okay, who she is and what she did. I really couldn't find much, and we're going to talk about that in a minute for why that might be. But the only thing I found was her being a symbol for like feminism, which I have never thought of. I don't know why. I think it's because she definitely is just for image sakes, and I think for somebody to be maybe I shouldn't gatekeep what it means to be a feminist. Ew, gross. But like if you're going to be a feminist, maybe you should like stand for something, and her whole job is to not stand for anything other than like British unity. But I mean, there is a discussion to be had about the discussion of whether she was going to be queen and if having a female ruler. But anyway, we
have a little bit of that. So whenever she became queen at age 27, after the death of her father, she so there was an issue of naming the house. So like the house is kind of like your last name kind of deal. Like, well, you just talked about Game of Thrones, like those houses.
Have you ever watched Game of Thrones?
No.
Okay. But yeah, I see your point.
You see my point.
Yeah.
So she wanted to maintain it as like the House of Windsor, which was what her ancestors had it, and her husband wanted it to be the House of Edinburgh because that's his title, and he said, "I'm the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children." What a drama queen.
Aww, poor little baby. Are you sad about that? You're literally married to the Queen of England.
You're married
Be
to
quiet.
the Queen. Like,
he's kind of annoying.
Okie dokie.
Anyway,
do you remember the picture that it was like a picture of him in a car and like everyone was making fun of it?
Prince Philip?
Yes, because it looked like he was actually like 2 steps from death. And they're like, our proud leader.
Oh, no, I don't remember that. I remember the photo of him at Epstein's Island, though.
Oh, that's a good one to remember.
I don't know if there's a photo, but I remember that's all I remember about him.
That's what you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. So she ended up having 4 kids with her cousin and cousin husband.
Love it. Okay, let's just move on. That's good. Love it. Love it.
So in total, she had 8 grandkids and 12 great grandkids.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah. So I didn't get into like the nitty gritty of her actual like policy and stuff, but from what I've found, it just seems like she's like a lady. It looks like she's just a lady. So why is everyone so mad at her? And we have a couple of talking points. So the most recent thing would probably be the Meghan Markle situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's the first time people were really recognizing the race component to the royal family.
You have to be careful because with the Meghan, and I don't want to.
No, go.
We could have a whole separate podcast about that scenario, but honestly, I just don't think it is deserving of all that time. But you have to be careful with that because Markle and is she married to Harry? Harry. They both made it very clear that the Queen was not involved in any of those remarks, but like they did that, before and after and during. But as they were telling these stories, it was very evident who they were talking about. So for record's sake, the Queen did not say these things, but people within the royal family were saying these things and nothing was being said about it. And when we're talking about what they're saying, basically there was a concern about, and I'm not sure of Markle's ethnicity, but
I think she's half black.
Okay. I'm not sure. But either way, she doesn't look like what every other British royal family members look like, very white, right? And so there wasn't a concern about what her children would look like and what that would mean for the image of the crown. And that was a discussion that was being had because we're not exactly sure who said it, but if somebody was gonna say it, it would have been the queen, right? So that was a big issue, and it caused a lot of people to look at her a little bit differently, but a lot of people supported her through that, right?
Yeah.
And some people have just forgotten about that whole story. So,
because like the only reason I bring it up for real is because like once she died, you had like these two schools of thought where people were distraught that she was dead, and then there was people that were like, I don't want to say enthusiastic, but I guess enthusiastic is the best word I can think
after
of.
she died,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily as one of those people. I think that it wasn't that we were enthusiastic. It was more like, why does this matter? She doesn't stand for anything. She doesn't do anything. She lived a long life full of money and family and fame. Did she die of natural causes?
That's what I'm
right. So
at.
she
Just
literally
got old.
lived the life of a queen without any of the. I'm sure there were lots of stresses about worrying about if your kids were going to be white or not. I'm sure that was really stressful for her, but she lived a good life, right? And so this whole like just people being so upset about it was kind of
weird.
Yeah.
Well, I mostly say that because like my observation of like Black Twitter was very, I don't want to use enthusiastic, but it was a lot of memes coming out about like in defense of Meghan kind of deal.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like out of all the things that she would be responsible for or something that we could call her out for.
Why are we focusing on that one?
Maybe because it's recent and maybe because we forgot like the history of colonialism, but
we're going to talk about that, but you have to remember it's a constitutional monarchy.
Oh, yeah,
she doesn't
I know.
really get a say in what was going on. And while I still hold her accountable for being a queen and like letting the UK be the UK and doing the things that they did without saying anything, she definitely didn't have any power to make anything happen other than her influence. And that influence only goes so far, especially when you're set up in the way that it is. So I think people focused on the Markle issue because it was the only piece of insight we had into these interpersonal relationships because everything is so coded. I mean, we can transition now into like this idea of Diana, right? The people's princess, right? There's a whole thing about like, was she killed, right? That's the same reason we talk about the people's princess in the same way we talk about the Markle incident. They always come side by side because, again, it's an insight into some kind of crazy things going on within the monarchy, and we can't talk about anything else because that's
all the information we have.
That's all the and it's set up to be that way. And so, and I don't want to go into all the Diana stuff. Honestly, she probably killed her, but it's like, I'm just kidding. I don't want to go into it, but I'm just
legally.
Yeah. That was all for goofs and gaffs. But like
most definitely, the Diana situation is like an example of her own people being upset with her because of her. She didn't talk fast enough, apparently, to them. She didn't come before them and was like, hey, this has happened fast enough to kind of portray that she actually cared about what happened.
Honestly, I don't actually think she killed her. It was probably just a really tragic situation. I mean, there's a discussion about like the driver having a really high alcohol like content in his blood, and there's speculations all over the place. Something tragic happened there, and so just as the Markle stuff is really terrible, and I hate to say Markle stuff, it's not her stuff. She was, if anything, was the victim to this, and so I don't mean to do that, but they're kind of two sides of the same. You get what you're saying? What's the phrase? Two
sides of the same coin
kind of stuff. And the colonial.
We're gonna get into coinage later, but keep going.
Oh, I didn't know that. But and the colonialism stuff. I mean, maybe we all don't know, but the UK and Britain has a very expansive history of colonialist ideas of expansion, right? Like they wanted their feet involved in everything that was going on.
Feet involved?
Well, I mean, when you look at the amount of ports, I mean, they had a lot of ships, right? It was specifically looking like in the Africa coast, right? They wanted to be involved everywhere that they could. They wanted to have, maybe it's because they have like a smaller area, so they wanted to expand out more, but they were super, super
I mean, there's the resources aspect to it as well.
They needed those resources, I guess, but they did it
as
through
much
some means
as you
that
need
were
diamonds.
Right. I guess it depends on how you're defining resources for that scenario. But I don't know, when I was trying to look up whether or not she specifically had a hand in that stuff that was going on, because I was one of those people that posted, yo, y'all are all sad about the queen, but like, did you forget that she's a racist and like a supporter of modern day colonialism? I guess you did. But then I was looking into that, and while I still hold that true because she didn't say anything about it, she definitely didn't have any influence, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm definitely finding that out after we've kind of gone through this, and I don't know if I'm mad at myself for being less angry.
I'm not any less. I mean, just because you're not the one, like, we were just talking about this in the car the other day about girls who are like liberal, who have boyfriends that are like using the F word or the N word or like being a straight up racist and homophobic, and they don't do anything. Like, oh, it's just their little quirks.
Okay, so like the passive aspect to it.
Yeah, she still is responsible. Like that girlfriend may not necessarily be
those
racist,
isms,
but she definitely isn't doing anything to curb that. And if anything, she's supporting those ideals vicariously through her partner. Same thing here. She didn't. Yeah. The queen didn't do anything.
70 years worth of nothing. Basically.
That's a long time to do nothing. And I have here, you see, lack of income taxes.
Yeah. So the queen and the monarchy didn't pay income taxes for a very long time, up until 1993. Basically, that's where public uproar kind of forced her hand to do it, which it's not. She didn't have to, of course, but she did. And it was also like a very small amount of her taxes that would go into the income tax. So like
it's another thing to add on top.
She's it's something
benefiting,
which makes sense for the people to be able to be like, hey, because we talked about how income into the monarch's pockets basically comes from the people. And so like I would imagine the main thing in the 90s, what is it called? Something burnt down. Basically the Westminster something. A palace burnt. Okay. And there was a lot of like they were trying to get stuff out of there, and I remember someone called it like it looked like a aristocratic garage sale because they were just pulling everything they could out of there, and it was a lot of people being like, well, it's her house, so she should pay for the repairs, not us, basically, kind of deal.
But she's the queen, so you're not going to put that pressure on her, I guess. You want to be nice to the queen. But, so there's a lot of reasons we don't like her, right? But that's not necessarily there's a lot of reasons we don't like her, but there's not really that many reasons that we do, I say, but we're going to get into that. How much can a UK monarch actually do under the parliamentary system? And so, quick little overview of the UK parliament system, that the parliament is the highest legislative authority in the UK. And so while Congress in the US is set up by 3 branches, legislative, executive, and
judicial.
Good job. Ding, ding, ding. There's your quiz. Okay. What was that? Flashback to last episode where you quizzed me.
Why did you say quiz like that? That sounded like you resented me for a second.
I was nervous. What if I got things wrong? Anyway, the Parliament has a House of Commons and the House of Lords and the King or Queen, okay? So the House of Commons is made up of about 650 elected representatives. So that is a lot of people. Yeah. But remember, there's lots of different like colonies and groups of people. There's lots of different political identities and you know what I mean? It's a little bit more proportional, I'd say. Basically, the House of Commons is responsible for making laws, checking on ministers during chambers and committees. So we all know the term prime minister, right? But we all know the term prime ministers, but ministers are those who command a legislative majority. So that can be for a specific like nation, that could be for a specific political party, just people who command a legislative majority. They're the ones that the House of Commons representatives are going to check in to kind of get a feel of what's going on. You
okay,
get what
it's
I'm
like
saying?
the party majority people we have.
Kind of, yeah. There's a lot more of them. But then there's also the prime ministers, and that's, those are the overseers of the ministers, hence the word prime.
It's close to kind of like a president, kind of.
Of
like
maybe
figurehead
they're a figurehead for these legislative majorities is basically what that means. Okay. And so the House of Commons is checking in on those people. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about prime ministers recently because Boris Johnson resigned and then the Queen, you were explaining this to me before the podcast, she picked a new one. Her name is Liz Truss.
Yes.
And she also comes out of a conservative party.
Boris Johnson resigned kind of scandalously.
Right.
I just remember watching on the internet how it just started to crumble, kind of, because I was just looking over at the UK like, are you guys all right?
Okay.
Because like people were resigning out of nowhere for him, and then eventually he resigned himself, and then they talked about the chief mouser, and they are asking the cat if it was gonna resign soon.
Do you know why he resigned?
I don't know the big thing. I know that there are a lot of little things going. So basically the people aren't very happy with him. Like, number one, whenever COVID came out, like it was like an album. So the world's worst hits, basically.
Right.
So
how about I tell you?
Yeah,
Let me tell you why people don't like Boris Johnson. There's a couple of reasons. One, because he was definitely a drunk. Okay. There's a lot of stuff about him. He's partying way too much. Chris Pincher, who was at the time the deputy chief whip, in his own words said that he drank far too much and embarrassed himself. Okay. He was accused of groping two men. That is, Boris was. Which led to a flurry of allegations, some dating back to years. So this was a whole big issue. There were lots of allegations that came out of that. On top of that, we have issues such as Partygate, where he went to a bring your own booze party in the middle of, in the Downing Street Garden during the very first lockdown. So it wasn't like we were in and he was getting tired of lockdowns. No, this man was like, yo, let's go.
Basically like on TV saying we are locking down and then throws a party.
Yeah, exactly. That party resulted in 126 fines and 83 people got in trouble for breaking lockdown rules. So that was a big issue. Let's see. Reporter Stu Gray said the senior leadership at the center, both political and official, must bear the responsibility for this culture. So again, he's kind of like giving a really bad... He's not
being a good example of a British citizen.
Also, he was in support of raising taxes during COVID. And so, the people of Britain were not happy about that. It went up by 1.25 pence. And so that is pretty not good. Let me just hold up. So there's a tax rise in April. Okay, that's what's wrong. National insurance went up by 1.25 pence in the pound. Okay, and also they tried to fix that by like cutting fuel costs. And Boris Johnson's just like no. Increase prices, increase taxes. So people didn't like that. Also, there was an issue where and I'm going on a bit of a rant here about Boris Johnson, but there was also a bit of an issue where there was a conservative MP known as Owen Patterson. He got in trouble for breaking lobbying rules when he tried to benefit companies who were paying him. So he got put on suspension, and Boris Johnson was like, nah, it's fine.
All good.
Yeah, no big deal.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, and
everybody has those days.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Later on, when Johnson was asked about this, he was like, yeah, I crashed the car on that one. That was pretty... I crashed the car. Let's also talk about some other Boris Johnson quotes while we're at it. Let me just tell you, this man, he said, and I quote, "I'm down with the ethnics," when speaking on the BBC Asian network in 2008. This man is insane.
Are you not down with the ethnics? Don't answer that. Don't answer it.
I don't answer it. We're going to move on. It is absolutely ridiculous that people should choose to go around looking like letterboxes.
Letterboxes?
I don't even... Here's a really bad one. Quoting Boris Johnson, "Orientals... ... have larger brains and higher IQ scores. Blacks are at the other pole." That was published in the Spectre hole while he was an editor in 2008. So this man is definitely a racist. He's definitely a drunk, and he is...
And not even an updated racist. That's old-timey stuff right there.
And he's been... Bringing it back to the podcast, he has been replaced with Liz Truss. And I don't know a lot about her. I know that she has kind of been picked out of this Conservative Party leadership, which is kind of interesting because, you know, like even in the United States, we're supposed to pick Supreme Court justices in a nonpartisan way. That obviously didn't happen here. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of that. Well, that's what prime ministers are. We'll go back to the podcast now. So there's the House of Lords. So the House of Commons talks to prime ministers and ministers about what's going on. House of Lords reviews bills that have been approved by the House of Commons, and kind of like our Senate does here, except while it usually is unable to prevent bills passing into laws, sometimes there's exceptions to the rules, of course. It can delay bills and force the Commons to reconsider their decision. So it's less powerful than the Senate, but they still have an important role in terms of making sure this like large group of elected representatives, the 650 in the House of Commons, are actually following the rules set forth.
Okay. Because that's a lot of people to keep in line.
Right. So just like we have legislative, executive, and judicial branches here in the U.S., we have the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and we have the monarchy or the crown in the United States. Okay, this is where the Queen comes in. The King or the Queen is the head of the state. However, as the UK has a constitutional monarchy, which is that just means that they do not have the ability to make and pass legislation, and that power belongs specifically to the parliament rather than the king.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So there are a couple of things that she can do. They can appoint prime ministers in a nonpartisan way, and I say that obviously that's not really what's happening, but she also can give a Queen's speech. So that's like the State of the Union address here in the United States, where the current president outlines his plans for the upcoming year. The Queen's speech is an opportunity for the Crown to communicate with the people. The Crown informs Parliament of the government's policy ideas and plans for new legislation in a speech delivered from the throne in the House of Lords. Although the King or Queen makes the speech about the government, the government draws up the content, though. So it isn't like the Queen or the King is actually having any impact. They're just
it's not actually their words. It's just being written.
It's written up by the government, yeah. And that's really about it. She really doesn't have any power, or he doesn't really have any power now, talking about King Charles III. So because they don't really have any power, when we're trying to look into if she did anything good, what's the worst thing she ever did, what was her platform, I thought maybe in researching this, I would kind of find things that were close to how first ladies act in the United States, where they usually have a platform that they work on, what they use their influence,
like philanthropic kind
exactly
of stuff.
Yeah, like Michelle took all the salt out of our food, like that kind of thing. But if
I could even get into the transition into Michelle's changing school lunches and having to hear what other kids were saying on a daily basis, we would be here all day.
Well, then let's not do it. So due to the Queen's position, she wasn't allowed to voice her opinion on politics, social movements, or even specific people. Anything that meant anything was out of the cards for any person who holds this title. Her role was to provide security and stability across the nations. Now, we can argue about if that actually did anything, but she is remembered for her comforting words in times of high stress. Most recently, people were, especially the people of Britain, were resonating with a speech that she gave, which is called "We Will Meet Again," which she gave to the people of her nation during COVID. Personally, I didn't really get the hype. I watched it. She just kind of is like, "It's gonna be okay." Why did I do Trump?
Did you do that?
What? That
Go on, I need your Queen of England voice. Go ahead.
I can't do it. I didn't really get the hype. All she really said was that it's going to be okay and we're going to come out of this stronger and blah, 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 blah. But so she's surrounded with controversy, as we've talked about, and the only thing that she can do to outweigh the whole racist colonialist thing is to wear cute monochrome outfits and read speeches that are being prepared for her. So it doesn't really feel like she had any impact. Our perception
of her personality isn't really it.
No, it's not. So now she's dead.
Yeah, so she died.
Yep.
That's why we're here. Where were you when you found out?
I was with Cole, my partner. He was like, "Yo, the Queen's dead." And I was like, I kind of laughed. I know.
No, you're not.
It's sad when here's the thing. It doesn't matter who you are. It's sad when people die because it's a loss of life. Yeah, honestly, I think I said, well, it's about time. Like,
look,
you know?
So going through research, all I kept seeing, because like there were some articles written before she had died, and it was talking about what happens when she does die.
Right.
And a lot of it was like, it's going to be a shock to the nation, and everyone's going to be in disbelief. This woman was 96.
Right.
Like, come on, y'all. I don't know how long y'all thought this. I mean, her mom did live to be like 101, but like,
still, we're in that range of like,
it's
a wind might,
it's nap time, basically.
a breeze might go by her and she like falls down dead. You know
And
what
like
I mean?
earlier this year, there was like, it got leaked, like she got sick, kind of.
Yes.
And everybody was like, yeah, she's dead, right? And then they're like, no. And so she didn't die. But what I found out, I was actually at the Washington Monument with my cousin, and I was taking a picture in front of the monument and stuff, and I was like posing all cute, and she was like, oh, go ahead, like the Queen of England. And then I was like, ugh, no thank you. And then she was like, she died, right? And I was like, say psych right now.
Yeah.
And so like then another set of tourists was walking past us and heard us, and they're like, for real? And they was like, finally. And I was like, dang.
Yeah.
And she felt kind of like, oh, the monarchy. But I was just like, well,
it is what it is.
It is what it is.
She's an old lady and she died. Old people die.
Old people die.
But what happens after they die?
Yeah. Well, some would say you meet God. All right. So anyways.
Anyway.
So she died at 96. So like we've had time to prepare for this. The thing is, everything's been planned out in advance. Like I'm talking 1960s.
Okay.
It got leaked, like not the entirety, but the plan.
The funeral plan?
Yeah. Well, not just the funeral plan. Like there's a lot that's going into this.
Okay.
So it got leaked back in 2017. And so the day that the Queen dies is called D-Day. And it kind of goes like this. So she dies. How many times am I going to say she dies? She passes away, and then the flag is lowered to half-mast within 10 minutes of it happening. Her secretary will go to the prime minister and make them aware of her passing through a code word. Mm-hmm. So the one that was leaked was that the London Bridge is down. So you just got to...
Really?
Yeah, look.
Really? That is so lame. That's not what my code word
what's
would be.
What's going to be your code word?
I don't know, but if I was the Queen of England, it would not be London Bridge. That's so lame.
I mean, and plus on top of that, it seems very obvious. Because like if I was passing by somebody and it was like, the London Bridge. And I'm like, oh shoot, she gone, y'all. She's gone.
I think mine would be, she's no longer talking. She finally shut up.
She finally shut up.
That would be mine.
That sounds like a mafia hit.
She finally shut up.
Oh, that's so awful. But
so it got leaked.
Everything got leaked, but I would assume that things probably got changed up.
Okay.
Because I don't see them keeping the same everything after everyone knows about it. And so another one was that they would be like, Miss Robinson, such and such and such and such. And that was like the code word for the Queen. So a mass email gets sent from the cabinet secretary to the government officials, and the news will be distributed out to the Commonwealths. I didn't hit this earlier. So like the Queen is the Queen of the UK and the Commonwealth. And the Commonwealth is basically like this coalition of like some formerly colonized countries and some that just wanted to join. And so like it's this big, like we got Canada, Australia, India, like these countries that have a history of British colonialization that joined this coalition. So she's in charge of that as well.
So they're getting the news that this is happening.
Yeah, they're getting the news that this is happening. And the prime minister is going to be like the first person to like break the silence.
Okay.
He's going to be like, or they will be like, she's dead. And then like we have the modern media aspect to it where they're alerting all the news stations, and it's obviously going to be on like the internet, but they also have like kind of a traditional way of doing it. Basically a footman that is going to be dressed in like mourning garb will put a notice in front of Buckingham Palace and be like,
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So her heir apparent will give a speech, which is Charles, give a speech promptly at 6 p.m. The day that she dies. And then the next day, the heir apparent is like automatically the new monarch. So we're not going to have a coronation for like another
transition period.
Yeah. So we're not going to have a coronation for like another month. But as soon as she died, he was automatically king.
Makes sense. Same way that we immediately swear in a new president when the other one dies. You can't show weakness. You can't not have a leader.
Exactly. Right? It doesn't look good. And so the next day, the heir apparent will be like briefed on like all the state secrets. So they'll talk with
like if aliens exist, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Cool. They're going to tell them the aliens exist and all that kind of stuff. That will be done with like the prime minister, which is going to be very important because like the former queen, I say former like she's been deposed. The queen, she would meet with her prime ministers like weekly. And she's been through like 15 of them. So it's a very close working relationship between the monarch and the prime minister, which is why it's important that we just got a new one. So do you remember when the government shut down? We should have been in like middle school.
Which time?
Which one do you remember?
Well, we shut down recently.
In the Obama years. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay. I remember. I was in my civics class and the teacher wrote on the board like our bell ringer, and she was like, guys, what do you think would happen if we didn't have a government? And so we're all talking about it, and we're like, oh, it'll be anarchy, and everything would go horribly, and nothing would go well, and everything would fall to pieces. And so we're just speculating and stuff. And then she's like, well, the government shut down. And like a bunch of us are just like,
oh no.
Oh no. Like it's became like a big deal for these middle schoolers that like,
it was
like it was a big deal. Not as big as we were making it in our when we were speculating. It wasn't like that. It was like national parks shut down and stuff, not like fire trash cans in the street kind of deal.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So we essentially have like 10 days to bury her.
Where she comes back to life.
And then we water her.
Why is it 10 days and not 11?
Okay, so
not that I don't mean to throw you off there. Just curious.
Actually, I believe it might be 12 days. I think it's 12 days, actually. So
10 to 12 days.
10 to 12 days.
Okay.
So basically, you have to have time for... So we're operating under Operation Unicorn. And Operation Unicorn is when she dies in Scotland.
Okay.
And then we have... what is the other one called? We have two operations, but Operation Unicorn is the one that got...
Operation Pegasus.
It isn't. It's something else weird.
But so she has to be buried within 10 days, and then what happens?
Well, so we have to go through the whole, like, viewing and all that kind of stuff, and then she gets buried on the last day. In that mourning period, Parliament stops session, so, like, that's where the government
So nothing's getting done.
Nothing's getting done. We have to get new currency. We need to get a new anthem, like a new national anthem. We can't do that. God Save the Gracious Queen anymore. We got to do a remix. We have to get new military and police uniforms for some reason. We need new passports. There's going to be no sporting events. Your TV scheduling is going to be a little wonky because it's going to be nonstop playing like British propaganda, essentially. Saw that a union strike got called off.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know how they negotiated that because I don't think people... I don't know. It's difficult for me to think people are that patriotic. I don't know if I don't like monarchies because I'm American or if I don't like monarchies because I got sense. I can't tell sometimes.
I mean, it depends on, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I mean, if it's a constitutional monarchy, it just really doesn't have any real role, so it's like costing a bunch of money.
The uselessness of it makes me apprehensive.
Yeah, it doesn't have any use, and then the whole government's being shut down, and union strikes are being shut down, and you can't watch TV, you can't play sports, Parliament's not working, your policing system, like, I see here food banks closed, non-urgent hospital appointments were canceled.
Yeah.
Like, she really didn't have any real impact other than making you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and now the government shut down.
I'm a bad podcast host. And that's because I didn't hit the very policy aspect of this, there was a recent, I guess they call them bills still, that basically prevented any like negative talk about the monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So people in the streets were like, hey, like, we're about to spend so much money on this and I can't access healthcare and all these kinds of things. And those people are getting either fined or jailed for speaking out against the monarchy. And it's like mad convenient that, I mean, it was done months in advance, but it's mad convenient that at the time of her death and there's these protests, you can shut them down through legal means.
Right.
So whenever I first heard about like all the stuff that was going down in the mourning period, I heard like kind of like ridiculous stuff like no riding a bike in London and like just little silly things, which as I did more research, those things were like retracted after they were like, okay, now we're being silly.
Yeah. So that's all very interesting. And it led us to question kind of what happens when a U.S. president dies. And so we're just going to quickly look at that. So the VP takes office immediately.
Okay.
When JFK died, I have a photo here if you want to look, and I'll try to add it into the podcast after recording. But, I mean, Jackie still has blood on her skirt. And it goes down her leg onto her shoes. Like, she's probably got chunks on her, and it's so important to get that VP to take oath that quickly that she's on a plane with was it Johnson? Yeah, Lyndon. Let me check that. Pause. Who was it?
I thought it was the other Kennedy.
Are you joking? That's funny. I might keep this in because that's funny.
No, but then I would be wrong or something.
Get Lyndon B. Johnson.
Okay.
Don't come at me, bro.
I'm
you
sorry.
saying it's the other Kennedy. No
when
way.
did the other Kennedy come in? There's another Kennedy.
Yeah, there's quite a few Kennedys, and they all were killed, and that's like a whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so
wait, they didn't even let her change her outfit?
No, she was immediately taken to the Air Force One, and she was on this plane with Lyndon B. Johnson while he takes his oath, and she got blood on her shoes. And it's like a big deal, right? So just as it's really important to get King Charles to take that role, it was important here. So for presidents who died in office lay in state, so we didn't really talk about that, but I don't think she's not laying in state anymore, obviously, but it's a point where there's coffins out there and you can walk
like
around
viewing,
and
basically.
pay respect, like a viewing. Flags will fly at half staff and federal buildings will close, but every half hour on the day that the president dies, the military will fire a shot. That's kind of just
they did firing shots for her too, which.
And but we do that. So when a soldier dies, we do that as well. So that makes sense. The family will get a special security, basically, for lots of different reasons, but also just out of respect. There's a bunch of different funeral stuff going on. So one of the first things that a president has to do is make a funeral plan. It's kind of morbid, but that's what they have to do. Same thing with Queen Elizabeth. She also obviously had to have a funeral plan, except she just wasn't ever going to die, so they never really had to use it, I guess. Typically, any important venues are draped in black. So if there's like portraits in the White House, they'll get draped in black. Some people want to like drape the entrance to the White House, things like that. It's a 5-day funeral. There's a funeral procession through DC. Then the casket is supposed to be taken across the country by train. Okay. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've had a president die in office, but that's the idea. They go throughout the country, and then they're going to be buried at a personal site. Okay. So it's not like we're going to bury them all right next to each other, right? They're at a personal, usually secret location, so that they're not going to be desecrated.
I guess it only makes sense that like monarchs, Queen Elizabeth, she was like put next to her husband and like her dad, and so that only makes sense because like they're family. But since she died in like Scotland, they had to train her down to London, and like it was written in the plan that at certain stations there had to be like people with like flowers, and like the prime minister needed to greet her whenever she came to London by train and stuff.
Out of respect for the crown.
Yeah.
Right. So like, what's the protocol for the UK with other countries? So obviously there's some overlap or parallels between how we handled the death of a president right? Or the assassination, the murder of a president.
Yeah.
But then also how the queen is handled when she dies. But I couldn't really find a protocol per se.
Yeah.
But when JFK was murdered, the queen wasn't able to attend the funeral like Biden actually did hers because she was pregnant. And she was a couple of months pregnant. And so she's quoted saying, "The unprecedented intensity of that wave of grief mixed with something akin to despair, which swept over our people at the news of President Kennedy's assassination." Wow.
Those are some
Right.
$7 words right there.
Yeah, she's very upset. And I did find a few things on Wiki that claimed there were a few British bands who made a few tribute songs, and some of those royalties were actually sent to the Jackie's family. But other than that, it was rather bare. There wasn't, because, obviously we don't have a more modern example. I couldn't really find that much. But I would assume that if, not going to put it out there into the world, but if someone was to die, right, there would be more news coverage of how other countries are handling these things.
So whenever I was in DC, the day she died, I had no idea anything had happened, but I was getting ready to like go out for the day, and I was like just looking outside, and I just hear bells. And I was like, oh, well, they have a bunch of cathedrals here, so it's probably like 2:00 or something. And then I didn't realize they had played the bells like 96 times.
Right.
Like my brain was like, yeah, this is fine. Like it completely went over my head.
Even when you told me that story, it went over my head as well. I was like, is this girl crazy? Like, what is she talking about? But 96 times. Wow.
Yeah, like obviously at some point you've been like, maybe something's up, or maybe someone has their finger on the bell button or something. Right. And then on top of that, whenever I had like gotten dressed and went out for the day, there were British flags everywhere. And I was just like, okay, because like I saw people like setting it up and like putting new flowers in and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, obviously there's something you're supposed to be doing once someone that important dies. And like, especially with social media, I saw a lot of, like Obama had to say something about it, and everybody like of importance, like Michelle and all them, they had to say something about it.
And they did.
And they did.
And so we would see that more.
I will say it was kind of funny that certain people were saying things like the Broadway Twitters for like Hamilton and Les Mis were like, you can rest now, Queen. Everything's gonna be fine. We got it from here. And I'm like, aren't your plays like based in anti-monarchy sentiments?
Right.
Like, I think you're missing
like she said, she was idealized for, I can't really tell you what reasons. I really did try to go in and try to find
the
it.
Suits and the hats.
It's the monochromatic suits. It's the hats. It's apparently she was big into hunting and things like that.
Another thing was the corgis. Everybody was so concerned about the dogs. And I think, did we talk? Well, this was a little bit before about how like most presidents get a dog while in office, and that kind of like humanizes them.
Right.
And so like someone's love for animals can outweigh like atrocities or whatever, or negligence.
That's the deal. Yeah. So is that the end of an era, or is it the end of an era? Do we think this is the last monarch? Obviously not. I mean, King Charles III has, you can argue with me on this, but he's already taken her place. And the line of succession is rather strong. There are questions of like who, but people do have kids. There is a strong line of succession. And so I have here, although the British monarchy is supported by a plurality of people across most age groups in Great Britain, it is among over 65-year-olds where the level of support is highest at 77%. Younger age groups are progressively more likely to oppose the monarchy, with 31% of 18 to 24-year-olds opting instead for an elected head of state. So there's a bunch of old people, per usual, right, who like what's going on, and a bunch of young people who don't like it. But that's only 31% of 18 to 24-year-olds. That's really not that big of a chunk, especially with the amount of news media or Reddit stuff that we saw of people going, we don't like the queen. It really isn't representative of how people are actually feeling. And because the queen is just there for image purposes, if you've got all your old people like her and way more than, half of the people who are younger and going to, be taking in being the future generation, they still like her. I don't see anything changing. It's bringing in a lot of money. People like her. But there are different types of monarchies. So, this isn't the last monarchy. This isn't the only one. There's constitutional versus absolute. We've already talked about that. Constitutional monarchies limit the monarch's power as outlined in a constitution, while absolute monarchies give a monarch unlimited power. So there are 43 monarchies left in the world. And out of those 43, only 3 are considered absolute. So we have Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Vatican City with Pope Francis. These are our absolute monarchies, so they are the decision holders of the government.
Okay.
Now, there's a question of whether it's even needed. Well, if 40 of the 43 are constitutional, meaning they don't really have a say. Now, there are lots of variations in how constitutional plays out, but really what that means is that they do not hold the sole power. Some of them might have more of a say in nomination of people and things like that, but I'd probably vote no, that they're not needed. Yeah. But we like them. And, there's, if anything, is sort of a tradition to have them in the countries that do have them. So, yeah, it's not the end of an era, just the end of
this one.
That one. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, Darcy.
Yeah.
Can we girl boss ourselves out of colonialism?
I don't think so.
What does girl boss even mean?
Okay, so girl boss is like based off definition.com. So to make something or someone appear as a feminist idol or an aspiration for profit despite the numerous flaws in the person. So like we were talking about earlier about the queen kind of being looked at as like a feminist symbol.
Because she's a woman in power.
Yeah. But like that's
where it ends.
That's where it ends. She like if the requirements are to be a woman and to be in power, then like, yeah, we've hit the feminist threshold.
Kind of. Depends on how you define power, because as we talked about in this podcast, she doesn't actually hold power. There's a discussion to be had about if influence can be power, but if we're talking more like in governmental powers, right? She doesn't really have any. So, the question, can we girl boss ourselves out of colonialism? Well, she definitely did, right? I mean, she's getting a lot of... That's not what
we're remembering, is it?
No. And even though there's people right now, like me and you and all these other people who are kind of like, well, let's talk about some of these other things that were going on. Those things are going to go away, and she is going to be remembered for being really old.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is to really question everything. Because, like, the opulence of a monarchy is derived from like a lack of distribution of wealth. It's this accumulation of wealth that is not being distributed to the people, and the things that we're wearing and the thing like crowns and jewelry and all these kinds of things are very much symbols of theft and just alt-right audacity in front of like the whole world stage. So,
but because we idealize it so much, going back to our beginning concept, other than the beans on toast, little girls want to be these things so much that we kind of are able to
excuse things?
Give an excuse. I mean, people are like, oh yeah, she stood by while these really terrible things were being done by Britain and the UK. But she's the queen. She's an old lady. It's fine. Yeah. So we do excuse it.
It is something very disarming about her age.
Exactly. Yeah, we excuse it because she's old and because she's a feminist icon. So that's why we're talking about this today for a lot of different reasons. We wanted to be able to
Lily wanted to talk about beans on toast.
But also we wanted to be able to define the parliament. A lot of people our age don't really understand that. We're talking about this for a lot of different reasons today. Some of those are because I wanted to talk about beans on toast, but also because we were able to give a little bit of insight into how the parliament works, the powers of a monarchy, how that's going to look a little bit different in the next, few decades. We, no longer have this icon, I guess you could say, the figurehead. So what is that going to mean for Britain? And what does that mean?
But my biggest concern was these kind of restrictions after her death and the opulence that's going to be necessary to install a new king is going to affect the British people. I'm more concerned about the people that are being left behind. And I think that needs to be kind of the focus of this conversation, because like whenever I'm trying to research this, I had a difficult time of seeing how this actually affects people living there. Like I found plenty of stuff on Operation Unicorn and all these London bridges falling down kind of deal, but like nothing about the actual people. And I feel like there needs to be a refocusing on the actual occupants of this place, you know?
Now that she's gone, we can focus on the people. That's the idea.
Yeah, or at least try. We got to do something.
And so as we learn how to do just that and learn lots of other things, we hope that you'll learn with us.
And we hope you'll make the journey with us. Just know, wherever we go, it's sure to be an adventure.
Bye!